In 2021, Ricki Lake and Abby Epstein released a documentary called The Business of Birth Control. The synopsis on the project's website states that the film examines the complex relationship between hormonal birth control and women's health and liberation. So, as a woman who felt psychologically screwed up from being on the pill for 4 years straight, I was immediately intrigued by the documentary's purpose to educate women on the side effects of birth control. I found a way to stream the movie online for free, and so I got all cozy and ready to have my hormonal issues validated until I found a Rolling Stone article that added some controversy to viewing this documentary. I believed that the movie was just going to show us how pharmaceutical companies have a lack of honesty about how taking birth control can change you, or at least result in some negative side effects. But the article is implying that a political agenda is behind this documentary. Seriously though, the title of the article is The Problem with Ricki Lake's The Business of Birth Control. Amy Zimmerman, the author of this article, thinks that the documentary is trying to be more persuasive to viewers than informative. She states, whether it's alleging hormonal birth control risks that have no scientific backing or making rare adverse events sound like common occurrences, the documentary's message is clear. In the words of one of the film's talking heads, we're saying, kill the pill before it kills you. Basically, my potential viewing experience that was supposed to just let me reminisce and reflect on my birth control era turned into a little bit, dare I say, a scandal. Zimmerman's Rolling Stone article discusses how the information in the business of birth control could be a threat against reproductive rights in the US, and how the documentary may have used traumatic historical events to further marginalize people of color. And then there's some tea about how the producer of the film is a brand ambassador for a product called Daisy, a device that uses your temperature to calculate if you're fertile. Daisy was advertised in a big segment of the film, even though the creators, Lake and Epstein, gave a statement to Rolling Stone saying that their creative decisions are not influenced by individuals or organizations who support their work. But Daisy's parent company, called Valley Electronics, was listed as a financial backer during the film's credits. After reading this Rolling Stone article, I was really skeptical about watching The Business of Birth Control, even though I feel so much regret when I do look back at my poor quality of mental health from when I was taking birth control that was loaded with synthetic hormones. A proper foundation of science was needed before my exploration into this very messy drama. I found a TED Talk titled The Surprising Link Between Women's Brains and the Birth Control Pill by Sarah E. Hill. Sarah E. Hill is an award-winning psychologist and author of the book This Is Your Brain on Birth Control. About 7 minutes into the TED Talk, Sarah E. creates a hormonal profile that displays what hormones are active or inactive on the pill. She states that the pill can decrease sexual desire because hormones that facilitate a want for sex, such as estrogen and testosterone, are lowered when you're on the pill. Meanwhile, a hormone that inhibits sex, progesterone, is dominant when you're on the pill. Sarah also explains how sexual functioning is affected when you're on the birth control pill. She makes it clear that sex hormones do not influence the brain, but sex hormones influence what individuals do. The levels of estrogen in a woman influences who they are attracted to because it predicts the amount of testosterone that they prefer in their partners. So, some people on the pill may experience changes of who they're attracted to because their estrogen levels have lowered. Lastly, I hope you're not sick of this hormone talk yet, but this next part is fascinating if you're also a victim of feeling like you're losing your mind on the pill. Sarah connects the birth control side effects on stress hormones to actual structural changes in the brain. A stress hormone called cortisol is released when we experience stress. Cortisol helps us cope with stress. Sarah explains that when on the birth control pill, studies show that women exhibit a blunted or altogether absent cortisol response to stress. This has a similar profile to people with trauma or PTSD. And a lack of cortisol can cause structural changes in the brain, problems with emotional regulation, and it can impair learning and memory. After Sarah's explanations of the negative side effects of birth control, I appreciated that she still showed a visual chart that displayed data about the female applicants to medical and law school pre-birth control pill. In the 1970s, the female applicants only made 10% of the applicant pool. Then, 20 years later, when the birth control pill was available, women made 50% of the applicant pool. Sarah honors the long-term career goals and educational goals that became available to women because of birth control. Sarah emphasizes that talking critically about birth control does not mean we have to give it up. When I finally watched the Business of Birth Control documentary I told you about earlier that Rolling Stone basically tried to cancel, Sarah E. Hill actually made an appearance in the film, and she preached that we must give women the power to make informed choices about their health. Okay, now we're at this point in the video essay to see if I actually become more informed after watching the documentary, or if I'm about to join Rolling Stone in completely condemning the project. The Business of Birth Control starts off getting into the science of what exactly the pill does to your body. The documentary claims that the pill switches off the ovaries and replaces them with synthetic estrogen and or synthetic progestin, which helps to suppress ovulation and prevent an egg from being released. Ovulation is necessary in a cycle because it helps our bodies create the necessary hormones that we need. If we're not getting these natural hormones, such as estrogen, it can disrupt bone development, be risky to our brain health, and cause heart issues. I was most curious about the mental health issues that can occur because that's where I noticed the most change from when I was on the pill for 4 years. A study from the University of Cambridge by Dr. Leidgard found a correlation of depression and birth control. Dr. Leidgard found an 80% increased risk in depression for women who started hormonal birth control between the ages 15 to 19. The film claims that the increase in depression causes women to be in this hyper-accommodating state, taking antidepressants and oral contraceptives such as the pill. From my personal experience, a lot of the conversations I've had revolving around birth control usually highlight the depression and mood swings that may increase. I could really relate to a woman in the film who said getting off the birth control pill makes every emotion feel like your own. Next up, there's a whole segment in the film about how doctors offer birth control as a solution to problems like heavy periods or acne, and how this sets people up to be at risk for disease and problems due to all the side effects. This part of the film was definitely trying to infiltrate some paranoia with the viewer because it launches into this whole segment full of personal stories from women who have suffered from sketchy birth control brands. There's a girl who went on the NuvaRing for an ovarian cyst and died after it made her lungs black. We learn about all the lawsuits from individuals against NuvaRing and how NuvaRing has paid $100 million in settlements for those lawsuits. And yes, NuvaRing is still available as a prescription on the market, if you were curious. I don't blame them for pushing skepticism about how in birth control advertisements, the brands restrain themselves from even slightly mentioning the side effects. The creators of the film say, why would these companies have incentive to report these adverse reactions? Maybe this is why 65% of the budget for pharmaceutical companies goes towards advertising the products the absolute best they can. Alright, so a huge portion of the Business of Birth Control film is to educate the audience on the history of birth control. This next part is absolutely awful, but we learn about how in 1935, slave hospitals full of black women were used to move forward gynecology by essentially sterilizing these women. And there were instances of this happening to indigenous women and Mexican women as well. Even some women who lived in government housing were forced to get Norplant, which is an implanted birth control device, and these women reported to have suffered from the side effects. A woman named Margaret Sanger had the legacy of distributing birth control to women in America because of her activism, but she was also an eugenics enthusiast. The main headquarters of Planned Parenthood was named after Margaret Sanger, until they took it down in July 2020 and cited her association with the eugenics movement. In a 2021 article, Sanger wrote that the most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the over-fertility of the mentally and physically defective. One of the women in the documentary says that Margaret Sanger believed in a science that promulgates white supremacy eugenics, and she wanted an alliance with the eugenicists. This alliance caused her to erase communities of women. For example, one of the trials to get the pill on the market was in Puerto Rico, specifically a part of the city with oppressed women who lived in poverty and who were experiencing problems from overpopulation. The trial had 132 women take the pill for 12 consecutive months. These women were desperate to control their fertility, but didn't know about the possibility of side effects. Unfortunately, 5 women died from the study and 1 died from suicide. Now, this is where Amy Zimmerman, the author of the Rolling Stone article, wants you to be aware of the opinions of Dr. White. Dr. White calls this a perversion of the movement it references. If we start to take away methods of contraception, it is absolutely people of color and economically disadvantaged patients who are going to suffer the most. The people whose reproductive justice is trying to lift up and elevate to begin with. Then the article quotes another doctor, Dr. Jones, who says, acknowledging the racist history of the development of birth control does not mean that the current medications available are bad, and it gets even more concerning when you look at who is behind these things, because it's very rarely going to be a marginalized person of color. Amy Zimmerman argues that the business of birth control doesn't have a motive to spread awareness about the racism in the past, but perhaps it's using this corrupt history to further marginalize people of color and achieve the goals of just making a bunch of money from a documentary. Please let me know what you guys think about this, because it's obviously important to bring up this history that consisted of so many poor women who suffered from these awful side effects, but do you think it's simultaneously causing harm to the reproductive rights movement by bringing this all up in an anti-pill documentary? The documentary still decides to show us some wonderful woman activists, such as Barbara Seaman, who wrote a book based on her interviews with medical professionals about what the dangers of the pill were. Seaman's book is said to be a catalyst to the women's health movement. This inspiring portion of the film also shows us the Nelson Pill hearings, which are nicknamed the Boston Tea Party of the women's health movement. These hearings were based on the information that Barbara Seaman found when she was talking to the doctors about the side effects. We are shown clips of women raising their hands while they're in the jury area of the court, and they are completely being ignored, while the men are the only ones who get to discuss the side effects of the pill. So the women start to stand up for themselves.
How are we going to have to sit here listening to the terrible effects of these pills on women without hearing from a single woman? I'd like to know where the drug companies' research studies are. Why do they all know that they have many adverse side effects that it's taken 10 years for you to begin to bring out?
Be quiet a moment.
We've been quiet for a long time. Quiet? We are not going to sit quietly any longer. You are murdering us for your profit and convenience.
The committee will decide who the witnesses will be, and we are trying to take the best scientific testimony we can get. of those who know the most about the effects of the pill.
Ask women. Ask women. I know that I was not warned. I know that I was told that they were safe.
All right, now I'm going to proceed with the hearings. I don't want to be...
we'll also proceed with our questioning then, too.
Officer, we will...
In the Nelson pill hearings, transcripts are shown that reveal the pill distributors were aware of the severe side effects, and they had evidence of suicides and deaths in the research from the original trials to get the pill on the market. We still get a win for the feminist health movement because they got mandatory labeling on the packaging of the pills, but the only side effect they talked about was the blood clot symptom rather than, the suicidal ideation that was also occurring. Guest speakers in the Business of Birth Control documentary start to claim that in America, the left doesn't like the idea that there are dangers associated with hormonal contraceptives because it damages the push for reproductive care that we should all have a right to. But the right in America can warp this skepticism about birth control pills to mean something else that threatens reproductive access, and then, as the documentary states, there's a continued escalation of everyone entrenched in their own sides. In her article condemning the business of birth control, author Amy Zimmerman believes that the documentary is particularly ill-timed when it comes to spreading information about the pill. Zimmerman claims that doctors are afraid that this brand of anti-birth control rhetoric could be weaponized by the right in America. She inserts another quote by Dr. White that says, "I really worry that we are entering a time that abortion's going to become illegal in half the country, that conservatives who genuinely don't believe in women having the right to control their own reproduction are going to come after birth control next. And then they can point to these headlines and stories and say, see, women are being harmed by these things, so we need to ban them." Zimmerman says, with Roe versus Wade at the brink of reappeal, abortions will most likely become even more inaccessible in this country. Enter a documentary that's stacked with experts trying to convince those in need of birth control that these safe and effective drugs are actually massive threats to their well-being and that they better be served by returning to natural methods. As feminists, like an Epstein said in a statement to Rolling Stone, we believe in unfettered access to all forms of birth control and abortion. They both believe that body literacy is more important than ever, and they just don't want the anti-choice advocates to control the narrative surrounding birth control. So maybe we all are mutually agreeing here and just going in circles about ultimately wanting women to have access to reproductive rights and having proper education on contraceptives. Or is the business of birth control actually really biased and trying to promote methods of birth control that barely even work because they just want a successful product that can give them money? After watching a majority of the documentary, it's evident that the creators of the film are passionate about a concept called body literacy, which, according to a quick search on Google, is about listening to and learning more about your body's natural rhythms, changes, and signals, so you can understand and feel more empowered when it comes to your health. So I personally like the idea of using body literacy to help women feel more in control of their bodies. The documentary features this whole segment about a woman birth control practice where patients see doctors that act like consultants for birth control and actually educate them on the effects of each one. There's a lot of promotion for the method of tracking your fertility and how it's empowering to know when ovulation is happening for you. It all sounds pretty beautiful until we get to learn about a product called Daisy, the thermometer that's connected to an app on your phone that tracks your fertility. They even frame it as an app that can replace birth control. And Miss Zimmerman from our Rolling Stone article is not happy about this. Zimmerman writes, Chelsea Polis, who is an independent research consultant in sexual and reproductive health, has consistently challenged the company, where Daisy is from, on its claims. Polis is concerned that Valley Electronics was marketing the Daisy device as a contraceptive method, even though it was not FDA approved as such, and claiming it was as effective as an IUD. This could leave consumers more vulnerable to the risk of unintended pregnancy. The article did not hold back mentioning when Polis subsequently described Valley Electronics as unethical and their study as junk science. The company responded with $1 million defamation suit, which has since been dismissed. This is a very clear example of a company trying to silence a scientist for speaking out truthfully and in evidence-based ways in their area of expertise, she says. Valley Electronics did not respond to Rolling Stone's request for a comment. So what do you think? Is the business of birth control using the concept of body literacy to promote a contraceptive scam? Because, as I mentioned in the intro of this video, Valley Electronics was listed as a financial backer during the credits, and the producer of the film is a brand ambassador for Daisy. So, are there some biased perspectives being thrown around at us, or is it just me? I understand that since the purpose of this video was to confront the realities of birth control and discuss the controversial discourse that surrounds it, you might feel overwhelmed when reflecting on what choices you can make for your body. It's only you that can make the choice to control your fertility with contraceptives, or make the choice to educate yourself on understanding your natural cycle. Once I went off the pill, I felt a lot more in tune with my hormones, and I gained the ability to predict how exactly I would feel throughout the month. More specifically, I started cycle tracking. In a video by one of my favorite content creators, Hitomi, she vlogs for a whole month to document how her daily routine is influenced by her cycle. She created these helpful templates that give you a visual on what each cycle represents. If you want to be more in sync with your natural cycle and take care of yourself with practices that are based on your body's current ability to perform, I really recommend that you try cycle tracking. I really want to acknowledge, though, that I know this isn't just a cute option for everyone, because I originally went on the birth control pill to control my period and just relieve some of the really horrible symptoms that I was experiencing, and it worked. I was having a lot better periods. And additionally, my skin was glowing. It looked like I had a filter on all the time. But the crazy thing is I never cried in public. Like when I was a teenager, I was not about being vulnerable. It was all about kind of suppressing it and crying when I got home, which I think a lot of teenage girls do, so it's okay. But when I went on the birth control pill, I remember one day I got really triggered at school and I noticed tears just started flying down my face, and that had never happened before because I just was really good at hiding how I would feel. But the years that went on, and I was constantly switching between birth control brands just because of prescription running out or a doctor recommending something different. At one point I did go to Planned Parenthood and they put me on something else. I was constantly just feeling depressed. It was very easy for me to have mood swings. You know, I'd be walking around in a good mood, but I stepped on a Cheez-It or something on the floor and immediately start crying. Like, that was not me before I was on birth control. So I really started to notice that something was wrong eventually, and I believe this was happening for a reason, but there was a mailing issue with my prescription, so I just stopped getting my birth control pill, and this was in January 2020. I was just like, you know what, I'm just not gonna take it for a bit and see what happens. And when I tell you that I started feeling so much lighter, things that I used to blow up out of proportion and take really personally just stopped affecting me the same way. I felt like I had this layer of control that was added that I didn't have when I was on birth control. Basically, the point of this whole introspective speech is I was on the pill for 4 years straight, having these constant mood swings and depressive episodes. Went off the pill, started to feel a lot more connected to myself and the patience that I knew I was cultivating but wasn't really able to tap into. Then all of a sudden, we're in a national emergency. I have to move cities to move back home. I'm broke. I lost my teaching job. I am a dance major in college and all my classes are gonna be online for God knows how long. Pretty frustrating, but I just remember, even though all of this was happening and I was feeling really sad about it, I couldn't help but to feel in awe at my ability to have less breakdowns about it, control my reactions, and just be able to calm myself down with emotional regulation I was not experiencing when I was on the pill. And who knows, this might be a little biased because I discovered before all this research that the pill just doesn't work for me, but I know that's a privilege. There's a lot of women who have to be on contraceptive methods to control really heavy period symptoms or acne, which is another thing I wanted to get into because when I was on the pill, like I mentioned, I had beautiful skin. I had never experienced acne problems before that. As soon as I went off the pill, my skin was fine. But about a year and a half later, I was having the most gnarly breakouts. I had never had this insecurity before of having acne, and it was really hard. I wasn't even wearing makeup. I'm vegan. I was eating my vegetables. I was eating clean, but the acne was still there. And honestly, after sticking to a consistent routine and trying not to change anything and just seeing if I could be resilient while waiting for my skin to clear up, it wasn't until I surrendered to the fact that I have acne and I'm still beautiful and it doesn't really mean anything. It's all a construct that acne is ugly, and I would just look in the mirror and be like, acne or not, I'm still cute, so it doesn't really matter. I just wanted to put that disclaimer to let you know that when you go off the birth control pill, it is completely normal for your hormones to naturally regulate themselves again, and you will feel a big reset. And as your hormones are fluctuating in different ways, you might have some more acne symptoms or heavy periods. And if I break out in a month from now, I am not gonna have a mental breakdown because I just feel so much happier not being on birth control. So please leave a comment if anything from this video resonated with you and what your experiences have been taking oral contraceptives, such as the birth control pill. This is just a really fascinating topic for me. As you can see, I'm really passionate about, and like I rambled, I have my own experiences that did change my life in all seriousness. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and take care.